I didn't scream. I didn't slam a door. I didn't even let my voice crack. I just set my fork down very carefully on the edge of my plate, folded my napkin, and looked at my father's face while he laughed at his own joke. Then I memorized the exact expression he wore when he said it. I've been memorizing expressions for 26 years. I've gotten good at it. 8 years later, my brother showed up at my door holding a box of my own products in his hands. He didn't know they were mine. He thought he was delivering a peace offering. What he actually delivered was the last piece of evidence I needed. My name is Claire. I'm 31 years old. I live in Austin, Texas, and I run a company that generated $4.2 million in revenue last year. My parents have no idea. My brother figured it out 6 weeks ago. And everything that happened after that is why I'm telling this story now. Let me go back to the beginning. Not the dinner, but the years that made the dinner inevitable. I was born in 1,993 inches, Naperville, Illinois. Suburban, middle class, the kind of neighborhood where every house had a manicured lawn and every parent had an opinion about whose kids were going somewhere. My brother, Daniel, was 4 years older than me. From the time I was old enough to understand comparison, my parents were already running the math. Daniel got A's. Daniel won the Science Bowl. Daniel was going to be a doctor. Claire was artistic. They said it the way you'd say someone had an unfortunate haircut. I remember being 9 years old, sitting at the kitchen table with a watercolor painting I'd made of the creek behind our school. My teacher had framed it and displayed it in the hallway for 3 weeks. She'd written a note home saying I had real talent. I handed my mother the note. She read it, smiled in a way that didn't reach her eyes, and said, "That's sweet, honey. Daniel, tell her about the regional math competition." I took the painting to my room, kept it under my bed. I still have it somewhere. By the time I was 14, the pattern was so established that I'd stopped trying to interrupt it. Daniel got a used car at 16, newly detailed, with a full tank of gas and a bow on the steering wheel. I got lectures about how gas was expensive, and maybe I should save up. Daniel's college applications were reviewed by a consultant my parents paid $600 for. I was handed a library book about essays and told I was smart enough to figure it out. Daniel was pre-med at Northwestern. I got into DePaul with a partial scholarship and my father's parting observation: "Communications is fine for people who like talking." I worked 22 hours a week all 4 years. I graduated with $37,000 in student loan debt and a GPA that would have made any parent proud if they'd been paying attention. They weren't. My mother's voicemail the day I graduated said she and my father were sorry they couldn't make it. Daniel had an important exam. She hoped the ceremony was nice. I drove home alone from the ceremony, stopped at a drive-thru, ate in a parking lot in my cap and gown, called my best friend instead of my parents. She stayed on the phone with me for an hour. That was May 2015. I moved to Chicago that summer, found a shared apartment, started working at a small marketing agency. I was good at it. Quietly, methodically good. I built campaigns, learned SEO, learned ad buying, learned what made people click and what made people stay. I also started selling things on the side. Handmade candles at first, then custom home goods, small batch items I designed myself. My Etsy shop opened in September 2016. I called it Hearthline Co. I didn't tell my parents. By November 2016, Hearthline Co. had made $4,000. By March 2017, $11,000. I didn't tell anyone in my family. It wasn't a conscious decision at first. It was just that there was no space for it in the conversations we had, which were mostly about Daniel's residency applications and my father's golf handicap and whether I was seeing anyone. My life existed in a separate room they never knocked on. Then came the phone call that changed everything. February 14th, 2018. 10:47 at night. I was packaging orders at my kitchen table, a glass of wine within reach, a true crime podcast playing low in the background. My phone lit up. My father. He never called me on weeknights. He barely called me at all. I answered. His voice was strange, tight and wet at the same time, like he was holding something back with both hands. He told me Daniel had been in a car accident on his way home from the hospital 3 nights earlier. Black ice, He'd walked away, but the other car hadn't. The driver of the other car had minor injuries, but his lawyer was already filing a civil claim. Daniel's liability insurance had lapsed. He hadn't renewed it after switching jobs between residency programs. My father said the number slowly. $50,000. That's what they needed to hire an attorney and protect Daniel's medical license before anything went public. I said, "Is Daniel okay? Can I talk to him?" My father said Daniel was resting. He was too shaken up to talk. "Claire," he said, "we know you've been saving. You've always been so responsible with money." He said it the way you'd compliment a dog for sitting. "You've always been so good at that. We need you. Daniel needs you." 50,000. I had 43,000 in savings. Every dollar from Hearthline. Every paycheck I hadn't spent on rent and food and loan payments. $43,000 I had built myself, quietly, in the hours after my day job ended. I told my father I'd have to think about it. He let the silence stretch long enough that it became its own kind of pressure. Then he said, quietly, "I just hope Daniel knows how lucky he is to have a sister who's there for him." I wired $35,000 the next morning, kept $8,000 for rent. My hands were completely steady when I did it. I don't know why I remember that. Maybe because I'd trained them to be. I called my brother's cell phone that same afternoon, straight to voicemail. I texted my father. He responded once, 2 words, "Thank you," then nothing. By the end of the week, every number I had for my family was going to voicemail. I drove by a collision report database online and searched Daniel's name, the date my father had given me, every variation of the intersection he'd described. Nothing. I called the hospital where Daniel had been completing his residency and asked if Daniel was available. The woman who answered said she wasn't able to share information about staff. I asked if there had been any incident involving staff in the parking garage on the date in question. She said she had no record of anything like that. I sat in my car in a parking garage in Wicker Park for 38 minutes. Then I drove home, opened a new folder on my laptop, and labeled it February. I put the wire transfer confirmation in it. I put the screenshots of my father's texts in it. I put a time-stamped note documenting every attempt to reach my family and every non-response. I didn't know yet what I was building. I just knew I needed a record. A week later, I tried Daniel's old college email. Bounced. I tried his Instagram, which I'd been quietly following without interacting with. He hadn't posted in 11 days. I checked my parents' Facebook. My mother had posted a photo that morning. Sunday brunch at their country club. My father, my mother, Daniel, and his girlfriend. All 4 of them, smiling over mimosas. The timestamp was 2 days after he supposedly wasn't well enough to talk. The caption said, "Grateful for this family." I closed the laptop, walked to my bathroom, turned the shower on as hot as it would go, and stood in it until the water ran cold. Then I went back to my kitchen table, opened my Hearthline shop, and got back to work. March 2018 to January 2025. 7 years. Here's the version that matters. I changed my phone number 2 weeks after the wire transfer. I didn't give the new number to my parents. I didn't give it to Daniel. I kept Hearthline running, then growing, then expanding into a real company. I moved to Austin in October 2019. Lower overhead, better shipping costs, more space. I rented a small warehouse unit on the east side for $700 a month. I hired my first employee in December of that year, a woman named Priya who handled fulfillment and stayed with me for 5 years. In 2020, when everything shut down and people started nesting, home goods went vertical. My revenue that year was $612,000. I didn't celebrate. I reinvested almost all of it. New product lines, a real website, wholesale accounts with 3 boutique retailers in the Pacific Northwest. I kept the business under my LLC, Hearthline Co. LLC, registered in Texas. My legal name on the paperwork was C.M. Garrett. My middle name is Marie. Garrett was my grandmother's last name before she married. She was the only person in my family who had ever handed me something, a $20 bill at holidays, a card that said, "Your turn is coming, kid," without expecting something back. I registered the business in her name the year she passed. In 2021, I hired 3 more people. In 2022, Hearthline launched in 8 Anthropology stores as a pilot program. In 2023, we went to 44 stores nationwide. Revenue hit $1.9 million. I was still living in the same apartment I'd rented in 2019. Still drove a 2017 Honda Fit. Still answered my own customer service emails before 9 in the morning. Daniel found my Instagram in the fall of 2023. Not Hearthline's Instagram, mine. The personal account I'd made after leaving Illinois under a different email, different username. He sent a follow request. I accepted it by accident. Thought it was someone from a packaging company with a similar handle. Then I saw who it was, and went cold. He sent a message. "Hey, I know this is weird. I just wanted to see if you're okay." I didn't respond. I removed him from my followers and set the account to private. He tried once more in January 2024. "Hey Claire, I'm not reaching out for mom and dad. I just want to know you're alive." I removed him again. What I didn't know, couldn't know, was that by January 2025, my parents were in real financial trouble. My father had been laid off from his pharmaceutical sales job in 2022. He was 61, and nobody was calling him back. My mother had gone back to part-time work at a dental office. Daniel had finished his residency and was doing fellowships, which meant he was still making resident-level pay while carrying medical school debt that topped $210,000. None of them had the cushion my parents had always assumed they'd have. On January 9th, 2025, my mother called a number she'd tracked down from an old address I'd once used for a business registration. She left a voicemail. Her voice was carefully controlled. She said she and my father just wanted to reconnect, that it had been too long, that they hoped I was well and that if I had a moment, they'd love to catch up. I listened to the voicemail twice. Then I added it to the folder, which I'd moved to a password-protected external drive by then. The folder had a name now. It had always been February, but I'd renamed it in 2022. I called it Receipt. I didn't call back. On February 3rd, 2025, a boutique lifestyle brand based in Nashville reached out to Hearthline's wholesale account about a potential acquisition. Not a full buyout, a 60% stake, with me retained as creative director for a minimum 3-year contract. The offer was $4.5 million. I called my attorney, a woman named Sandra, who'd been handling my contract since 2021. She told me to sleep on it for 48 hours and then tell her yes, which I did. The due diligence process began in February. It was thorough. One of the things the acquiring company required was a brand audit, a full review of our social media presence, press mentions, retailer relationships. They hired a brand consultant firm in Nashville to conduct it. That firm, as it turned out, subcontracted part of the digital review to a boutique agency in Chicago. My brother worked for that agency. He had left medicine 2 years earlier. I didn't know that. He'd burned out in his second fellowship year, had what he later described to me as a full breakdown, and had quietly shifted into healthcare marketing. He was a senior associate at a small agency called Meridian Creative Group. He'd been there for 16 months when Hearthline's file landed on his desk. March 4th, 2025. He called me at 6:47 in the evening. The number was from a Chicago area code I didn't recognize. I almost didn't pick up, but I did. "Claire." His voice was careful and strange. "I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me." I didn't say anything. "Are you C.M. Garrett? Is Hearthline yours?" I let the silence run for about 5 seconds. Then I said, "Why?" "Because I'm looking at the incorporation documents and the registered agent address, and I've spent the last 4 hours going back through everything, and I can't find another explanation." A pause. "You built this. You built a company with anthropology and 4-point-something million in revenue, and you've never told anyone." "No," I said. "I haven't." He was quiet for a long time. Long enough that I heard him exhale slowly, the way you do when you're trying to decide whether to say the true thing or the easy thing. He said, "The true thing. The money they called you about. In 2018. There was no accident. I didn't move. I found out maybe 3 years in," he said. "I confronted Dad. He told me you'd given it willingly, that you'd insisted, that it was your idea. I didn't push back because I didn't know what had actually happened. Another long pause. I should have pushed back. I've known for 2 years that something wasn't right, and I told myself it wasn't my place. It was $35,000, I said. I know. They used your name. I know. His voice broke slightly on the second word. Not dramatically, just a hairline fracture that I recognized because I'd heard myself sound the same way in parking garages and cold showers for 7 years. Claire, I want to help, if you'll let me. I didn't say yes that night. I said I'd think about it. I sat at my kitchen table with a glass of water and a yellow legal pad, and I wrote down everything I could verify. Everything he'd said. Every question I still needed answers to. Then I went to sleep. But I texted him in the morning. What do you know? He told me everything he'd found. My parents' finances were worse than I'd imagined. My father had taken a part-time consulting gig that was barely covering utilities. The house in Naperville was mortgaged twice. They were carrying significant credit card debt across 4 accounts. And Daniel had gotten a call from my mother 2 weeks earlier, telling him that they'd tracked down something about Claire's business and that it was time for the family to reconnect. That was the word she'd used. Reconnect. My brother had not told them what he'd found in the Hearthline file. He'd stalled. He'd told them he was still looking into it. He'd called me instead. I asked him why. He said, "Because I owe you that much. And because I think they're going to reach out to you directly whether I help them or not." I told him to give me a week. Don't tell them anything. Don't confirm, don't deny. I needed time to prepare. He said, "Okay." And Claire, I'm sorry. I'm sorry I wasn't louder when it mattered. I didn't respond to that part. Not yet. I spent the week pulling everything from the receipt folder onto a clean external drive. I organized it into a timeline document. February 14th, 2018. The phone call. The voice recording I'd made on a second phone I'd kept running in my pocket because something in my father's voice had triggered an instinct I couldn't name at the time. The wire transfer confirmation. The screenshots of texts going unanswered. The screenshot of my mother's Facebook post. The social media posts from every family gathering I'd been excluded from while supposedly being the one who'd walked away. 7 years of dates and screenshots and receipts, all in order. I called Sandra on March 11th and told her I had a situation developing. She charged $350 an hour, and she was worth every cent. She told me to keep documenting, not to reach out first, and to let her know the moment any contact was made that felt like a demand. March 14th, 2025. My mother called. The number was one I didn't have saved, but the area code was Illinois. I let it ring through. She left a voicemail. Her tone was completely different from the one in January. That one had been careful. This one was warm, almost breezy. She said it had been too long. She said she and my father had been thinking about reaching out for months. She said she hoped I was doing well and that she'd heard through the grapevine that I was running a little business, and she thought that was just wonderful. She said the family missed me. She said my father's health had been a little difficult lately, and it would mean so much to him to hear from me. She did not mention the $35,000. She did not explain why every number I'd had for them had gone to voicemail for 7 years. She said my father's health. That was the new angle. I forwarded the voicemail to Sandra. I forwarded it to Daniel with 3 words. "Here we go," he replied within 4 minutes. "I'm ready." March 20th. My father sent an email to an old address he'd found through a mutual connection. The subject line was, "Family." The email said he was reaching out because life was short and family was everything. It said he was dealing with some health challenges and that having his daughters estranged was making it worse. It did not specify which health challenges. It said he knew there had been distance, and he hoped we could move past it. Then, in the second to last paragraph, it said, "We've heard you've had some success with your business. That's wonderful. I hope if you're in a position to, you'll consider helping your family the way we helped you all those years." The way we helped you all those years. I forwarded it to Sandra. She called me the same evening. Her voice was dry and precise, and I had never been more grateful for anyone's professional affect. She said, "This constitutes an implied financial demand following a period of estrangement they initiated. Combined with the voicemail, it establishes a pattern." She said, "If they escalate, we respond." She said, "You have more than enough documentation to establish the 2018 fraud as wire fraud under federal statute." She said, "Are you ready for this to get uncomfortable?" I said yes. I also called my brother that night. I told him what the email said. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said he'd been expecting something like it. He said he thought they genuinely believed I'd be too relieved to hear from them to push back. He said, "They think you're still the girl who wired the money. They don't know who you are now." I said, "Are you going to tell them?" He said, "No, but I think you should." April 2nd, 2025. I flew to Chicago. I met my brother at a coffee shop on the north side, a small place called Longshot, with exposed brick and the smell of dark roast permanently in the walls. He was already there when I arrived. He stood up when he saw me. He looked older. The residency years had aged him in a way photos hadn't captured. He also looked, underneath the tiredness, genuinely ashamed. Not performing it, just wearing it. We talked for 2 hours. He filled in the gaps I hadn't known. My parents had used the $35,000 to pay off credit card debt and a personal loan my father had taken on a bad investment in 2016. Daniel hadn't known in real time. He'd only found the records after the confrontation in 2022. He hadn't known they'd blocked me. He'd believed, or had let himself believe, that I was the one who'd gone quiet. I showed him my phone. Screenshot after screenshot of outgoing calls and texts that had gone nowhere in March 2018. The green messages, the timestamps. He stared at the screen for a long time. Then he said, "What do you need from me?" I said, "I need you to write down everything you know. Dates, what you found, when you found it, what Dad said when you confronted him. I need your statement. I need it signed." He pulled out a legal pad from his bag. He was already ahead of me. We spent another hour on it, every detail, every date, every admission my father had made, written down and signed and photographed with both of our phones as witnesses. April 9th, 2025. Sandra sent a certified letter and an email to my parents' home address and my father's personal email. It was 41 pages. Pages 1 through 4 covered the February 2018 phone call and wire transfer in full detail. Pages 5 through 15 laid out the timeline of their blocking me, the documented attempts at contact, the social media evidence of the family functioning normally during the period they'd claimed I was the one who'd pulled away. Pages 16 through 24 included Daniel's signed statement. Pages 25 through 30 covered my parents' recent contact, the voicemail, the email, the implied financial demand. Pages 31 through 38 were Sandra's legal analysis. Wire fraud under 18 U.S.C. Section 1343. Fraudulent misrepresentation. The documented pattern of contact designed to extract financial benefit. The last 3 pages were the cease and desist. The final paragraph read, "Any further contact with Claire, with her business, with her employees, or with her professional partners, will result in immediate referral of this matter to the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Northern District of Illinois, and simultaneous filing of civil claims seeking damages in excess of $600,000. You have 5 business days from confirmed receipt of this letter to respond in writing confirming agreement to cease all contact. Failure to do so will be treated as non-compliance." Sandra sent me a copy. I read it at my kitchen table in Austin with a cup of coffee that went cold while I was reading. Then I sat there for a while in the quiet of my apartment, the succulent on my windowsill that I'd had for 4 years. The morning light coming through the blinds in long, flat lines. The hum of the city starting up outside. My phone buzzed. "My brother. You okay?" I typed back. "Yeah, just thinking." He wrote, "They're going to be scared." I wrote, "Good." 3 days passed. No response. My father called Daniel twice. Daniel let both calls go to voicemail, per Sandra's advice. My mother called Daniel once. He didn't answer. On the 4th day, my father emailed Daniel directly. A long email full of words like betrayal and ungrateful and your own parents. Daniel forwarded it to me and Sandra without responding to it. Sandra added it to the file. On the 5th day, at 4:37 in the afternoon, An email arrived from a family law attorney in Naperville named Martin Duffy. Subject: Cease and desist Garrett. Hearthline matter. The email was 2 paragraphs. It confirmed receipt of Sandra's letter. It stated that his clients disputed several of the characterizations contained therein. It also stated, in the second paragraph, that his clients agreed to cease all unsolicited contact with Claire, pending further discussion of the underlying matters. Sandra called me within the hour. She said. They blinked. I asked what pending further discussion meant. She said it meant they were hoping to negotiate. She said, they have no leverage, and they know it. This is a face-saving phrase. She said, we don't negotiate. We respond with one sentence confirming receipt and restating the terms. She sent that response at 9 the next morning. April 20th, 2025. Confirmation from Martin Duffy that his clients accepted the terms of the cease and desist in full. I was in my warehouse when Sandra called with the confirmation. Priya was running a shipment with 2 of our other employees, and the sound of tape guns and cardboard was steady and ordinary in the background. I sat down on a packing crate and listened to Sandra read me the confirmation email. When she finished, I said, is it over? She said, for now, it's over. People like this sometimes circle back. But you've made the cost very clear. She said, you've done everything right. I thanked her, hung up, sat on the packing crate for another minute, then I stood up and went back to checking labels. That evening, my brother drove to Austin. 8 hours. He called when he was 2 hours out and asked if he could stay on my couch. I said yes. He showed up at 11 with gas station snacks and a bottle of wine he'd been saving for a reason he hadn't known yet. We sat on my back porch until 2 in the morning. He told me about the burnout. The way the last 2 years of residency had felt like standing under something very heavy and knowing eventually it was going to come down. He told me he'd spent 6 months in therapy learning to say the word enough, as in, I have done enough, I am enough. He said it with the careful emphasis of someone who still wasn't completely sure they believed it. I told him about Hearthline. All of it. From the first Etsy sale to the anthropology pilot to the acquisition offer sitting on Sandra's desk. He listened without interrupting, which was not a thing I remembered him being able to do when we were children. When I finished, he said quietly, Dad used to say you weren't focused enough, that you didn't have the drive. I said, I know. He said, I believed him. For a long time, I believed him. I looked out at the city lights beyond my small yard. There was a wind coming through the cedar trees my landlord had planted along the fence. The kind of warm Texas night that in other circumstances would have felt like the beginning of something. You know what's strange, I said, is that I don't need you to feel guilty about it. I really don't. I just need you to be honest about it going forward. He nodded. Then he said, I'm proud of you. I know that doesn't fix anything. I just need you to know. I let it land without deflecting it, which was something my therapist had been working with me on for 2 years. I said, thank you. April 28th, 2025. The acquisition closed. $4.2 million wired to Hearthline Co., LLC's business account before noon. I stayed on as creative director. Salary $165,000 annually, 3-year contract. I still own 40% of the company. I was at my desk when the transfer cleared. I refreshed the account twice to make sure the number was real. Then I texted my brother. It closed. He responded in 3 seconds. 4.2 million, from a woman they called unfocused. Imagine. I laughed out loud. First time I'd laughed out loud alone in my apartment in longer than I wanted to think about. May 5th, 2025. I met my brother for coffee. He was in Austin for a work trip. We went to a place on South Congress, the kind of spot with good light and better pastries and tables far enough apart that you could have a real conversation. He brought me something, a box, not wrapped. He set it on the table and pushed it toward me. Inside was a blue ribbon, the 3rd place ribbon I'd won at a school art show when I was 9 years old. The one I'd kept under my bed in a house that didn't frame things for me. I stared at it. He said, I found it in the garage a few years ago. I'd taken it before they could throw it out. I didn't know what to do with it. He paused. I know it doesn't change anything. I just thought it belonged with you. I picked it up. The ribbon was faded a little, one edge worn soft. Third place, it said. Ridgefield Elementary Art Show. 2002. I held it for a minute. Then I put it in my bag. I said, I'm going to frame it. He smiled. Good. We sat there a while longer, talked about his new job, a healthcare client he was actually excited about, an apartment he was thinking of renting in Lincoln Park. Normal things. The kind of conversation I had watched other people have with their siblings at graduation parties and Sunday dinners for years, standing slightly outside the frame, thinking it wasn't for me. It turns out it was. It just took longer to get there than it should have. May 10th, 2025. I had the ribbon framed. Simple oak frame, white mat, glass front. I hung it on the wall above my desk, next to a list of our top wholesale accounts. Third place. Ridgefield Elementary Art Show, 2002. 2. Garrett. My parents have not contacted me. Not directly. Not through Daniel. Not through anyone. Sandra checks in quarterly. The folder on my external drive is still there. Still password protected. Still complete. I don't open it often. I don't need to. But I know where it is. Some mornings I sit at my desk in the warehouse and I watch my team run orders and I think about the version of myself who stood in a drive-through line in a cap and gown, eating alone, not crying. I think about the woman who wired $35,000 at 7 in the morning with completely steady hands. I think about the 14 years of slow, quiet accumulation. The skill set, the savings, the patience, the evidence. All of it collected before I knew I was collecting it. They spent 26 years telling me I wasn't enough. They assumed that message had stuck. They didn't understand that I'd been listening so carefully to what they said about me that I'd learned exactly what I needed to become in order to prove it wrong. I'm not going to tell you I'm not angry anymore. I am. Some days, at specific hours, in specific kinds of silence, I am still completely furious. That's allowed. The anger doesn't run my life, but it's honest, and I've made a decision to be honest about all of it, including the parts that aren't resolved, and probably never will be. What I will tell you is that I'm sitting in my office at 7:45 in the morning, and outside my window, the Texas sun is coming up hard and bright, and there is a third-place ribbon on my wall from when I was 9 years old, and I did all of this. Every cent, and every decision, and every morning, I got up and went back to work. All of it was mine. They wanted me to be someone they could define. I became someone they couldn't find. That's not the ending I imagined when I was 24 years old, eating in a parking lot in a graduation gown. But it's the one I built, and I would not trade it. Not one piece of it. Not even the hard parts. Especially not those.